CA here, and I decided to make a video response towards another member of the furry fandom, though this one is asking some questions and as well giving thoughts that I would recommend some Christians to even consider. So let's take a look at both.
It's something I'm sure nearly everyone has heard. Something good happens, a surgery goes well, an award is won, someone survives a trauma, and what's the first thing you hear? Thank you, God, or praise Jesus. But why is the credit going to God? Even those who believe in Him must realize that most of the time, it's the hard work of other human beings that allow good things to happen.
I agree, we should not just be thankful to God, but we should also be thankful to other people. While the Bible doesn't explicitly say this, we should know that the fruit of the Spirit includes love, joy, and kindness. So when we thank people, we show we are kind, nice, and grateful towards others. Colossians chapter 3 verse 15 says, "And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to the which also ye are called in one body, and be ye thankful." So we should consider thanking people besides God. However, I also do not think it is derogatory as a result because we thank God. We must do both, which as long as other humans are thanked, then it shouldn't offend them. However, what is good and interesting about the question is why the credit even going to God in the first place? I like this. I like how she asked this question. Well, for one, the Bible tells us to do so and that we will thank Him in light of the fruits of the Spirit that dwells within us. But we do it because we believe God is in complete sovereign control over the universe. While we make decisions, we must realize what Proverbs chapter 16 verse 9 says, and that is, "A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps." So while we devise our plans, we must remember the lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord. So everything is in the hands of the Lord. It's all in God's hand and in His will, including the work of the human beings who trained and worked so hard to accomplish these tasks that they bring out. So yes, we may boost the self-esteem of others while also thanking God and the person. So let us not take away the credit and instead apply the credit to both the person and God to whom it should go to properly. But we must recognize mainly that God has given us life and God has allowed these events to happen and to allow them to be part of the plan that unfolds in this world.
To those of you who do thank God for when good things happen in your life or someone else's, I'd like to ask, do you also blame Him for when things go badly? This is not something I see very often. Instead, I hear people making excuses for bad things. Statements like, "It was just part of God's plan," or "God works in mysterious ways." But if God directly causes good things and you thank Him for it, He must also directly cause bad things. If your team loses, did God help the other side out? And if you really think that losing is in God's plan, why don't we hear teams saying, "Thank God we lost today"? Atheists might hear that we are angry at God, but I would think theists have far more cause to be angry with Him than those who don't believe He exists.
No, I do not blame things on Him, but I do recognize that there are times that bad things occur. While I blame it on the bad guys or sinners, I do that out of emotion, usually because I am human. But it is true that they did sin and we should hold them accountable. A person who still commits sin is a sinner. However, we can recognize that even when bad things happen, from team losings to bad tragedies, God is still there and there is a plan in which God uses something for good. For example, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to His purpose." Not to mention, when Joseph was sold into slavery and eventually helped people to be saved from a famine, he told the brothers who sold him into slavery, "But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass as it is this day, to save much people alive." So think of this. While certain people die in the wake of a massive tragedy, there's also a better rationing of supplies. Not saying we should go all Thanos on these people for that reason to end the suffering and all this. I'm just listing what we would call side effects, if you wish to call it that. One story I can say is regarding my brother, who was a bit distant and rebellious during his teenage years. One of his friends ended up passing away pretty badly. I won't go into too much detail on how, but let's just say my brother did feel like he lost somebody very important to him. He then definitely relied on his own family for help and support. He was closer, and now he and I talk over the phone whenever we get a chance to call each other, which happens at least once a month. Something that was very rare as well that used to happen back then. We barely talked to each other that much either. Regarding this, I believe God used an event like this in which it affected our family and our own personal life, in which it brought my brother closer to the family. And things like this have happened to me as well, personally on me. And I don't blame God for them happening. There is also a philosophy or theological view in Christianity known as Christian hedonism, which was popularly defined by John Piper in his book Desiring God. John Piper has developed this view which says that the best joy and desires to fully desire and crave for in our selfish desires should be the desire of God in all things. So this is especially noted in terms of everything, including suffering. He has plenty of sermons and lectures on this, but for now I will just play this one clip so you can understand how he views this and in which I somehow have a sympathetic view towards.
So anybody that writes a book and says all the songs in heaven were about happy things, were about glad things, there was no mention of suffering in any of the songs, you say, wrong. That's the center of our singing forever. The goriest, most sinful, most horrible act of suffering that ever happened will be remembered as the centerpiece of the grace of God forever. Good Friday did not happen to be forgotten. It happened in order to become the center of worship forever. This is why I presume it was the center of worship here as we rehearse for that day. It's an awesome thing that suffering has such a central role. Awesome thing.
Lastly, I would just suggest this. If you're religious and you want to thank God for something that's occurred, you're certainly within your rights to do so. But do you need to do it out loud? And possibly in the face of the one who objectively did the things you're giving thanks for? If God can hear your thoughts and prayers in your mind, then there's no need to make another human being feel slighted. As a wrap-up, I would just implore people to give credit where credit is due.
Again, based on what I said in my first statement, I believe we should thank the human hands and minds. But when we do say thank you to God openly so others can hear, we also hope they see the power of God and that if they have doubts, maybe this could help out, or even, especially if they ask questions, it opens the door to evangelism. We are also showing we aren't ashamed or afraid of professing our belief in God before other people. So while I may sometimes respect people's wishes, I will also sometimes have to let them know that I am within my right, as the skeptical furry canine here noted. It just depends on the circumstance and the situation in which I decide to carry it out further. So ultimately I would suggest this: do not be offended in the fact that we desire to see God being in control of things and feel like we offer him thanks for it. It's just how we believe things, and you can't blame us for these beliefs that pretty much, on all honesty, do not cause any sort of physical or bodily harm to people. If you are a Christian, I would suggest this: thank others besides God in light of what we just discussed. Because I agree, we need to keep in mind what the other person who did this work is doing. We need to keep them in mind. It would be kind, fair, and nice to do so for them. So thank you, Furry Skeptic, for the food for thought. It was certainly tasty and filling. This has been the Christian Anarchist. Have a great day.